Welcome, patrons! I've had a very weird, sleep-deprived week, so let's just go off schedule to something I know you guys enjoy, but it's also pretty easy to talk about. Common Theories Part 2. This time we cover 3 basic Arlathan-centric theories. The Black City is Arlathan. This might be one of the oldest theories I know of that still holds water. I don't have any origin for it, but I'm able to find forum posts dating back to 2011. I'm sure there are other older posts, but as the BSN was taken down, I bet a lot of that discussion no longer exists. Anyway, the theory itself is pretty easy to explain in just the title alone. The Golden/Black City is the great elven capital, Arlathan. For those of you who are unaware, the Golden/Black City is a giant city in the sky seen in the Fade, no matter where you are. In Chantry Tales, this was the Hall of the Maker, populated with spirits, but he soon abandoned it after humanity started to worship the old gods. Originally the city was golden, but after the Devendra magisters broke into the city using blood magic and urged by the old gods themselves, and walked in its halls, the city turned black and has been that way ever since. Arlathan, on the other hand, is the great city of the elves that was sacked by Devendra and, as legend states, sunk the city into the ground. Jump to the release of Trespasser, where we find out that the Fade and reality were once one and the same, and Solus was the one to create the Veil. Also something to note is that great elven structures that relied heavily on magic stayed in the Fade, like the Virdathara, which, speaking of my favorite library, we get an actual account of Arlathan, describing it as very blue and just covered in magic. So here's the thing. There really isn't a lot of proof for this, other than Arlathan is a city that poofed away, and the Black City is one that just appeared. That's really most of the basis on this, but the interesting thing is that the more we get to know about the world of Thedas through games and media tie-ins and so on and so forth, the more that this hasn't been debunked. At the moment, the most reasonable explanation is that when Solus split the Fade from the world, a large chunk of Arlathan went with it, while another chunk stayed behind, and that's the part that Devendra sunk into the ground. But why would Solus make the remains of Arlathan equidistant to all points in the Fade and just generally hard to get to? Well, first let's talk about another theory. Andruil found the Blight. As far as I can tell, this is completely based on one codex entry from Dragon Age Inquisition called Elven God Andruil. I won't read it all here, but this is the gist of it. Andruil went looking for the Forgotten Ones, but found the Void instead. After taking many trips there, she began to go mad. She made an armor of the Void and forgot who she was, plague ate her lands, and said a lot of things that were supposed to be forgotten. Mythal got tired of it, took all of her new armor, tossed it into the Void, and made Andruil forget where it was. Then everything was fine. We don't know what the Void is, so let's forget about that for a moment, but it's interesting that whatever it was, she made an armor out of it. Many have taken this to mean that she found red lyrium, and much like Meredith in Dragon Age 2, went completely mad. Because we know red lyrium is blighted lyrium, then it would also make sense that a plague hit her lands, that plague being the Blight sickness. Before I go into what fans think happened next, let's talk about a rebuttal for this theory. While so far the thing that she found, being red lyrium, makes a lot of sense within the context, I want to offer another option. She just found regular lyrium. While the games certainly forget about this part a lot, it is set up that regular use and being around too much lyrium, especially for mages, brings a lot of what is described in the codex entry, mainly being addiction, forgetfulness, memory loss, and paranoia. The only unexplained thing, then, is this plague, which could easily just be that there was so much lyrium in her lands it started to affect other people. What could be a proof of this is that in Trespasser, the Elven lyrium mine is dedicated to Mythal. Perhaps in the tale, Mythal did not end Andruil's madness and kindness, but rather she wanted it for herself. So when she made Andruil forget the place where she found the lyrium, Mythal took it over. But that's my own theory for the moment, and let's get back to the basic one where it is red lyrium. So, if the Blight was introduced onto the surface, it's very hard to get out, as seen by places in Thedas where the Blight has ruined the land and turned it into deserts. This theory then states that it made its way to Arlathan and infected people there, which leads to our third theory of the day. The Black City contains the Blight. Part of this also dates back to Dragon Age 2 when Corypheus mentions it in the Legacy DLC. When the Magisters broke into the city, they were spat back out tainted. The question here isn't, is the Blight in the Black City, but rather, why is it in the Black City? It's also important to note that while the Chantry teaches the people that Devendra was the one to turn it black and taint it, Corypheus states that it was already tainted when they got there. And at that point when he tells you, he has no reason to lie about that. So I'm willing to believe him. So, that means it was there the entire time. Again, why? There are really no good answers for this unless you subscribe to the other two theories I mentioned earlier, or at the very least the core of them, being that the Black City was once elven and the Blight is older than we think. After Trespasser, this is the basic theory of what has happened. Andruil finds the Blight, taints everything. This part also has an alternate start of Mythal finding it in the deep roads, but that's for another day. It spreads either on purpose or an accident. The city of Arlathan becomes so tainted it becomes a lost cause. And then Solus, seeing all of this, and also probably having been in the process of taking down the Evaneris, puts up the veil in an attempt to stop it from spreading, the center of the infection unreachable by anyone unless they can breach the veil, which, as we see, is very hard to do, and Solus seems to be the only one that has the key. Supposedly. He had it and then he gave it away. That's a whole thing. Now, a lot of what I just said was set up in Trespassers, so what was the main idea that everyone had as to why the Blight was in the Black City? Well, I don't think there ever was a main consensus on that. A few people had their ideas, but there wasn't just one theory that everyone subscribed to, that I could find, at least. Remember that the main boards, the BioWare social network for this type of discussion, no longer exists or around. There's a couple things archived, but not to the extent I could do a lot of research. So that's that. Another question would be that if the Black City was always black, why did it once look golden? There's really no good answers for this. I've seen some people talking about how it was an illusion from the old gods, an attempt to get people to come into the city, and that's so far the best answer I found. Either way, if it wasn't really golden, a large amount of people used to see it that way. And that, dear patrons, is all that I have on these comment theories. Do you have something to add to these? Please put them in the comments below. While I love getting your PMs, I am so far behind on PMs. At this point, if you want people to read them, just put them in the comments. That's going to be your best bet. There are a lot of room discussions on these, and I do want to know your opinions. I've just been so swamped, I haven't had the time. But anyway, do you still have lingering questions, proof that I'm wrong, comments about your own fan theory? Feel free to tweet me at @Gildathon on Twitter or send a PM to user Galanon on Reddit. The rest are all.